You are already used to the dominance of Great Russia over the peoples it forcibly incorporated into its territory.
Today, Azerbaijan has launched a real special operation against Russian influence in the country, and President Ilham Aliyev is already openly sending the Russian dictator Putin away. After the scandal with Russian security forces raiding Azerbaijanis in Russia, during searches at the office of the Russian propaganda news agency Sputnik in Baku, Azerbaijani police detained 2 employees of the Russian Federal Security Service who were working undercover in the editorial office. In addition, Baku is completely severing all diplomatic relations with Moscow and refuses to receive Russian officials. In addition to this, today all Azerbaijani media, without exception, are openly speaking about the Kremlin in a humiliating manner and are showing the real truth about Russia's bloody war against Ukraine. And they state that the Kremlin is forcibly making Azerbaijanis in Russia go to fight against Ukraine. Moreover, unexpectedly in Azerbaijan, they called on the authorities of Armenia, which would seem to be hostile to them, to get rid of Russian influence, and this had an effect. The head of the Armenian Foreign Ministry refused to go to the Collective Security Treaty Organization summit today, stating that Armenia has nothing to do there. Overall, Baku's rhetoric today probably comes down to one phrase: Azerbaijan is now a strong regional power, and some Russia should shut up and not interfere with Azerbaijan. And Baku can afford such rhetoric because, after all, Turkey stands behind it. My name is Alexei Peichi. Today is June 30th on the calendar. Let's discuss this topic in detail together, because there's definitely a lot to talk about. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, leave a like, write any comment, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we post breaking news as soon as it comes in. So Azerbaijan has seriously started to counter Russian influence inside the country. And I'll start this episode by showing a few news segments from central Azerbaijani television channels to give you a sense of the general attitude of Azerbaijanis toward Russia. To give you some context right away, let me briefly remind you that on June 27th in Russia, during a raid, Russian law enforcement detained 50 people under the pretext of checking their involvement in murders that took place between 2001 and 2011. 2 of the detainees died. They were brothers Hussein and Ziadin Safarov. Many of the others showed signs of beatings, and so Azerbaijan demanded an investigation and, in response, cancelled the visit of the parliamentary delegation to Russia, as well as all cultural events. But that was just the beginning, because in Azerbaijan these raids were called systematic and openly racist, saying that Russia deliberately started ethnic cleansing. Well, I talked about this scandal in more detail yesterday in this episode. Be sure to go to my YouTube channel and watch it to be fully aware of what's happening between Azerbaijan and Russia. So, I want to say that it's just amazing how Azerbaijan is now raising its head and strengthening its position against the backdrop of Russia and Iran weakening. And I'll also show you now how sound the political position in Baku is. So, I'll give you a few stories from the main local central television channels. The first story is about Russia's war against Ukraine and the Russian raids on migrants, who were thrown into battle to make up for losses in personnel. Let me explain here. In Baku, they are convinced that all these raids against Azerbaijanis are actually aimed solely at forcibly sending them to fight against Ukraine. They say, let the Russians stay at home, but Azerbaijanis can be thrown in as cannon fodder.
Today, cities and towns in Ukraine are being wiped off the face of the earth.
Today, Ukrainian cities are being wiped off the face of the earth, the country is undergoing blatant genocide, and the Ukrainian people are experiencing one of the most nightmarish humanitarian crises. But now human resources are running out and Russia is sending migrants into battle. Their families and relatives are being threatened, beaten, and even killed, like the Safarov family. But those who go to war are not even given compensation. But in the next report, Azerbaijani television directly states that in Russia, it's 1937 all over again, with repressions, genocide, and total dictatorship. Now, Lubjanat Putin. What happened, Mr. Putin? Are you so concerned about Azerbaijan's transformation into a powerful regional state? We understand you're used to the rule of the so-called Great Russia over peoples who were forcibly joined to it. Both during the times of Tsarist Russia and during the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the Russian people were the dominant nation, while Azerbaijanis, Uzbeks, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, Turkmens, and others were always seen as secondary. And today, has your way of thinking changed? Just as Stalin, through the People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs, eliminated anyone who raised their head, today Putin destroys and eliminates anyone who demands their rights using the Special Purpose Mobile Unit. They say that now it's like 1937. But does the official Kremlin, and specifically President Vladimir Putin, understand that it's not 1937 now? It's 2025, and the countries that were once part of the Soviet Union have been independent for more than 30 years. Does Putin understand that in history nothing is forgotten? Beer?
The countries that were once part of the Union have also been independent for more than 30 years.
But the third episode on Azerbaijani television honestly surprised me, because in it Azerbaijanis openly call on the Armenian authorities to finally rid themselves of Russian influence, which Moscow is imposing through the so-called Orthodox Church. Church fanatics, oligarch Samvel Karapetyan, and former presidents Karechan and Sargsyan received signals from Moscow if the Armenian government faces the threat of being surrounded by the church, which is supported by Russia and the radical forces gathered around it. And if Pashinyan does not come out victorious from this brutal confrontation, then there will be no need to follow the next parliamentary elections in Armenia. And right after this story, I want to point out one rather interesting fact. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia, Ararat Mirzoyan, stated that he will not participate in the meeting of the Council of Foreign Ministers of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, or Collective Security Treaty Organization, which is taking place today, June 30th in Kyrgyzstan. Instead, Mirzoyan is holding a press conference with the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas. But the authorities of Azerbaijan are not stopping there, and have also started to clear their country of Russian agents, who have deeply entrenched themselves there. First of all, Azerbaijan refused to receive Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexei Averchuk because of the raid on representatives of its diaspora in Yekaterinburg, during which, let me remind you, dozens of people were detained and 2 died. In turn, the Ministry of Culture of Azerbaijan announced the cancellation of all joint events with the Russian Federation that were planned to be held in the Republic, including concerts, festivals, performances, exhibitions, and so on, regardless of who is organizing them. In addition, for the same reason, the Azerbaijani parliamentary delegation led by First Deputy Speaker Ali Akhmedov cancelled its visit to Russia. And today, during searches at the office of the Russian propaganda news agency Sputnik in Baku, Azerbaijani police detained 2 employees of the Russian Federal Security Service. They were working there undercover, and today the police cordoned off the building where this agency is located, and then summoned to the office all employees who were not at their workplaces. The Ministry of Internal Affairs of Azerbaijan called what was happening an operation and promised to provide more details a little later. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, in turn, reported that Russian diplomats are not being allowed access to the agency's employees without any explanation. Interestingly, the Embassy of the Russian Federation informed the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and the State Security Service of Azerbaijan about what was happening. But there, they simply ignore any requests from Russians. And representatives of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs are already publicly complaining about this. Mashka Zakharova. And it's telling that the Kremlin stated that the actions of the law enforcement agencies of the Russian Federation, who, let me remind you, killed and sent several Azerbaijanis to intensive care, are forcibly sending Azerbaijanis to Russia to fight against Ukraine. This is not at all a reason for, quote, diplomatic demarches from Baku. I'll leave it at that. Draw your own conclusions. Do it yourself, write your opinion in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like.